Maybe all of us. Rajni Shankar-Brown. With over 3 decades of advocating and innovating for human and civil rights and a lifetime of public service, Dr. Rajni Shankar-Brown's leadership has shaped and influenced public policy and seen the launch of multiple initiatives dynamically supporting diverse communities and schools. Her work is focused on advancing housing justice for children and youth, domestic and intimate partner survivors, individuals with disabilities, LGBTQIA+, tribal nations, and older adults. She specializes in addressing trauma and fostering well-being, including healing-centered engagement. In addition, she's a dedicated ama, it's a mom, who loves sunflowers and masala chai. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. How beautiful. I loved hearing everybody share about yesterday and the hope for people to be showing up and organizing and mobilizing. And what I loved is the multi-generational aspect as well. We have a lot of work to do, but we are the people to do it. So today, I have the joy of sharing with you a presentation I put together called Threads of Pride, Weaving History, Resistance, Love, and Hope. So October is a very special month. We celebrate a lot of really wonderful causes to bring awareness. I know my daughter does a lot of work with breast cancer awareness this month. In addition, it is LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus History Month. And so this is History Month, and it was actually founded by Rodney Wilson, who was a high school teacher in Missouri who was openly gay and faced a lot of discrimination, saw a lot of hatred, misunderstanding in the schools. And part of his fear was we had Pride Month in June, but his fear was also how do we start to teach history so people start to know what history connections have led to today and the paths that have been carved, but also the work that continues to need to be done. And so we have this month being historic LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus History Month. In addition, October 11th was National Coming Out Day, and today, October 19th, happens to be LGBTQ Plus Resource Center Day. And so it is actually a day to bring awareness to resource centers. And if you know now, across our nation, with funding slashes and cuts, removal of protections in so many communities, we are losing fundamental centers that provide resources for mental and behavioral health, to supporting services for education and advocacy, and all of these vital services. And so one of the things I think we're called to do as we reflect and gather together is to continue to think about how do we show up in our communities to create inclusive spaces and to support organizations and individuals who are doing the work to create more loving, just, healthier communities. And so there is a lot we can talk about as we sit on LGBTQ plus History Month, and I would start by sharing one of my big concerns, right? A lot of stones going in here, a lot of rocks, is really thinking about what is happening across in our schools, especially in our state. So if you look at what is going on, the legislation that continues to be passed and even introduced, we are taking out so much teaching of truthful history, of history connections, of diverse reflections and representations of the beauty of diverse stories and people. And of course, poet and writer Maya Angelou so beautifully reminds us that in diversity, there is beauty and there is strength. And so it really hurts the heart to know that so many of our young people in schools have no connection points to so many diverse stories that need to be uplifted and told. And what happens when you have generations who will not know those connections or have access to that information that is vital, to truthful history that is so important for us to teach. And this extends not only in K through 12 schools, but also, I just realized my mic might not be on, but I talk pretty loud. Let me see. Testing, is that better? Okay, yay! This also really does impact, right, colleges as well. So if you look at our state, we have had LGBTQ plus and multicultural centers completely closed down, taken away across the state in public universities and colleges, and programs that teach Africana studies, programs around Asian studies, around queer studies being cut. And so again, there is this public threat that is very active, and it is a form of violence as well, because it is an erasure of people, of stories. And one of the ways people have always oppressed is by keeping and withholding knowledge, right? What stories do we tell? What stories do we not tell? Who has access to knowledge? Who does not? What histories are told and silenced? And so we have a lot of work to do. So October 11th, again, is National Coming Out Day. And so in fact, the opening song today I picked by Sarah Bareilles, to be brave and authentic, she wrote that for a friend who was really fearful to come out and to share. And we have so many who are very fearful because of things like in the schools, if you look at the amount of bullying, still hate acts that continue, it is quite horrific. So organizations such as GLESEN, G-L-S-E-N, do a lot of research to really try to lift and illuminate what is happening in our schools, and we still have continued harassment, attacks, even LGBTQIA, Two-Spirit Plus students committing, dying by suicide, right? And having higher suicide attempts, often due to the harassment and bullying. And so, again, a lot of work to do, and it's not just our students, even educators in our schools losing their job, being harassed. All of these things are very real and in motion. So on October 11th, National Coming Out Day commemorates the anniversary of the second National March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. This took place in 1987. So I don't know, did anybody participate in the march or remember this march? It was a historic milestone, right, in our country. And then National Coming Out Day was founded a year later in 1988. And it was founded by activists Robert Eichberg and Jean O'Leary. And it celebrates really the courage for individuals having to come out, especially when society often does not make that easy, when there are often hurdles and barricades and a lot of misunderstanding. And if you look even globally, there are still numerous countries where you are persecuted, even killed for being gay. Laws, right, codified. And so we have a lot of education that needs to happen. And everybody can have diverse beliefs and live life how they want to live, but to impose hate, impose oppression on another life, at least from my lens, is unacceptable. And we want all of our community members to be able to live authentically. And I love, in this space, we always say all are welcome. And I know I feel that, and I love that this is a space that cultivates and grows love so openly. And so I thank all of you for creating this space, for being in the community and creating spaces of love, which is so important. And so, the acronym, right? When I said LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus, I saw some eyes go, That's a lot of letters. So what do those letters mean? And over time, you'll hear sometimes LGBTQ+, LGBT+, LGBTQI. So there's a number of ways you may hear, right, the letters kind of expanded and said. I often will say LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus. This two Spirit also recognizes our tribal nations and indigenous partners. And so here we see, right, L, lesbian, G, gay, B, bisexual, T, transgender, Q can stand for queer or questioning, I, intersex. So what is intersex? Intersex is where someone is born with both parts, a penis and a vagina at birth, and it happens way more commonly than people realize. So in fact, historically, what would happen is doctors would often just decide and take a part out, and this was done routinely, which led to sometimes complications and challenges in individuals' lives, and people advocated to say, well, that's not the medical practitioner's decision, right? It needs to be the family, the individual's decision, as somebody who's intersex. And so this has been kind of a talk for a long time, and people don't realize how many people, right, are intersex, which is, a small percentage, but much larger than often people realize. And then asexual, right? Not having kind of a sexuality. And this is really interesting. I have a student who actually wrote this brilliant paper about being asexual and what it's like growing up asexual in a world where romance and sex are so centered in things. So even if you think about all of the Disney movies growing up, right, there's this kind of more innocent romance, right, but always this kind of kindred sexual attraction, right, somebody has to somebody else, and she never felt that, and found herself struggling in this really, very real way throughout her journey to feel like she doesn't belong, she's out of place. And so it's interesting to kind of think about all of these and the wide spectrum, right, of us as humans and our own experiences as we live. And then two-spirit, again, our indigenous communities. And then the plus being for additional identities, because there are so many, it's a spectrum. So, the pride flag. A little bit of history about the pride flag. The pride flag originated in 1978. And Gilbert Baker designed the first pride flag, and he designed this at the request of San Francisco Mayor Harvey Milk, who was openly gay, right? Harvey Milk. And I'm so proud, I'm just going to brag on my daughter for a moment, because in elementary school, she did a project on Harvey Milk and the pride flag for her social studies project. And it was a huge controversy. That she little did she know, she loved rainbows, she loved learning, and she was very inspired by the movement. And so she did this beautiful project, but she was able to advocate, and her teachers, a few advocated for her to stay in the fair, and she ended up winning. And so I was like, yes, so proud of her. And it also is kind of a sad moment in our family's life too. During that time, we had a hate act happen where our house was robbed, and we had vandalism happen, and we had a break-in. And it was vandalized, and in that, they had actually destroyed her project. She had to redo everything, and managed to do all of that in less than 2 days to get it back ready for the fair. But very, very horrific time. Just
hateful things that were written, and we lost so many things where, objects are material. I always say to the kids, we're so thankful our lives are intact, which is most important. But it still hurts to have kind of sentimental pieces taken from you, right? That violation, which is real. But Harvey Milk, asked for a pride flag. And, he debuted it at the San Francisco Gay Freedom Day Parade, June 25th, 1978. And so they wanted a flag that represented, and so each of the colors also have beautiful meaning, which I'll share in a moment. So if you look over time, it is really, really this rainbow of evolution that is interesting, because there have been so many numerous flags that have been designed over time, where people have expanded on things. They've started to pull out and say, well, here's a flag for being genderqueer or bisexual or asexual, in addition to kind of the overall pride flag. And so there's this really beautiful history. You step back and you just see all of the colors, right, of all of these things, but all of them have symbolism, right, a lot of symbolism. And if you go in today, this is one of the most updated pride flags. So if you go in kind of in the evolution of the pride flag, the updated pride flag starts to first of all have the original flag that was created, right, that Gilbert created. And you will see here the colors, which Harvey Milk and many activists actually had meaning behind all of those colors. Red, life. And I like it because I also see connections to chakras, which you all remember, because, red is our root chakra, which is our root of life, right? So I feel like some Sanskrit influence got in there. So I'm like, yeah! Orange, healing. Yellow, sunlight. Green, nature. And if you look at nature, you look at biodiversity. Biodiversity is so essential for a thriving community in nature. When we threaten biodiversity, what happens? Really awful things happen. But when we allow diversity to kind of live and exist, we actually get this flourishing, right? And so nature. Blue, harmony. And purple, my favorite color, spirit, right? Spirit. And so the original meanings were intact. In addition, the updated flag started to recognize a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality, which basically means that certain people based on different identities may have additional challenges, right? And so they started to say, well, what happens if you are gay and you are a person of color in a society that has many different isms, right? Racism, heterosexism, all of these kinds of oppressive forces. So they said, we want to kind of lift and give space for that. And so that's where you start to see the brown and the black for people of color. And then you see trans represented there with the pink and the blue and the white. And then intersex represented with the yellow. And then the circle is kind of the people, right? All of the different identities that we may not actually identify or name and beyond, right? Some that are named, but are not maybe listed specifically. So it is, the expanded pride flag is really this kind of beautiful progression of, I think, communities and people wanting to be even more inclusive, to tell a richer story, but still keep and honor the original pride flag that has history, right? That has history. And so I did get flags for everybody who would like to take one home. And so before you leave today, you can take one and put it in your house and be an ally, right? Be an ally or celebrate your pride, right? Whatever your identity is. And so I think it's important. And in a lot of spaces, again, where there is this kind of erasure and attacks of not making people feel safe and welcome, one of the beauties of the visual representation is allowing people to know you are welcome here, right? Come in, welcome, let's celebrate. And if you go back to the meanings of all those colors, there's really beautiful meaning there. So in fact, something I love at Stetson, we do something called a lavender graduation, where it's inclusive for everyone to come, but we really try to uplift our LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus students. And we do a beautiful sand ceremony. And in fact, I was going to say maybe in June, during Pride Month, we could replicate and do a sand ceremony here. I'd love to, be happy to purchase the stuff and bring it in. But it's really fun, where everybody reads the meaning of each color, and we pour the sand, and then you have this beautiful kind of community creation that you can keep. And so just an idea I'm throwing out there, right, to manifest. So yeah, lots of meaning. So, who wants to guess what's going on in this photograph?
Pride Week.
Okay, I hear Pride Week, I hear March. So this was during the Stonewall riots, right? So the Stonewall riot happened in 1969 in New York City, right, in Greenwich. And what happened was people marched. People got hurt, but people rioted to stand up for rights. And this is a really, really important piece of history. And I will share a resource that's wonderful that kind of tells more about the history that maybe could be shared out in the newsletter, right, for folks who are interested in learning. The other thing I want to let you know is if you are ever in Fort Lauderdale, there's a beautiful Stonewall library and archives there that's really lovely to visit. And one of the exhibits that's been up for a while, I don't know when it'll come down, but it's a replication of Stonewall. So you go in and you see the bar, and you experience kind of a bit of Stonewall, and it gives you history as you go through. But they have been able to collect a lot of books that have been banned from all over, to also keep and archive and preserve those stories, which is really, really important. And they have a nice online resource hub as well to check out. So, banned books. It breaks my heart, it aches my heart, it hurts so bad to think about all of these beautiful stories that have been banned. But not only that, the fact that our state, the Sunshine State, is now #1 in banned books. We surpassed Texas. We have the most banned books, right? And if you look, the majority of stories that have been banned are stories of people of color, even innocent historical stories, including a children's board book my daughter used to love called Rosa Parks. And it was just a story about Rosa, like a sweet story. Why would you ban that? Well, we can get into why. So I have a lot of theories, but also stories reflecting beautiful, diverse identities, LGBTQIA2+, even characters that are side characters within a story, banned. And what does that mean? What does it do? Right? What messages are we sending to ban stories based on identities of people who, exist, right? We are here in our communities, right? And so when we ban these stories, we take away touch points for young people, especially young adolescents, to see themselves reflected in literature. For others to actually learn about diversity. And if you look at the stories that are banned, beautiful, beautiful stories. And so it really, really is this kind of heartbreaking. But one of the things I think we can do is we can support by reading banned books, right? Pick up a banned book. There's some really great stories, right? George Johnson's stories, it's a memoir, All Boys Aren't Blue. It's a very powerful piece, right? All of these stories are wonderful. Now, what's interesting is the story Lawn Boy, right? Some stories have kind of historically been around forever, and then now they're being attacked as well, right? Even Where the Wild Things Are. You all know that story. It's a classic, Maurice Sendak, right? Imagination, a classic on the banned books list, right? Unbelievable. But I think that's another way we can start to mobilize and show up, right? To say we're going to read and we're going to make lists and And I'm proud of our young people. Valen, now he tries to gift banned books to his friends, right? Which I think is awesome, right? Like, here's a banned book, read it, So as we think about everything going on in our nation and even in our state, what we see is really, really terrifying times. For a lot of people, it's not just the struggle and the stereotypes and the fear and the bias, but now when you start to have legislation passed, right? Like, don't say gay. I mean, the bills that DeSantis has brought in, to our state, that people have brought in and pushed, there is an enacted violence that happens, and it trickles down all the way into our schools and the lives of young people. And we see a lot of legislation every day that is passed. Now, this being LGBTQ plus Resource Center Day, there are some great organizations out there doing amazing work. One I want to point us to, because we are situated in Florida, is Equality Florida. So I do a lot of work with them. They have a wonderful conference that they do for educators to educate and give resources. But they're a great organization to check out, right? That's state-based, and you can keep up with what is going on. We've been able to organize, mobilize, and push back on some things and win, right? With numbers and collective action, things can happen. An example is Safe Schools, Safe Place stickers, which would have a rainbow and just say this is a safe space so students know, especially given the amount of lives lost, right? It is really important for our young people to know, where is a safe place I can go, that I can talk to somebody. And so these stickers were commonly put on counselors' doors or people who were safe places. He said, you can come here. Well, of course, with the legislation, districts were making everybody remove all of that, right? You can't have that. You can't have anything, any kind of visual sign or, and through mobilization and pushing back and saying, well, there is still freedom of speech and protections that include, and show up even in our Florida Constitution, saying that our public schools are for the public, that everybody should feel safe. We were able to mobilize, go to Tallahassee, push back, and change some of that. So now those stickers can be there. Now, of course, a lot of times people are still fearful, right? Districts kind of still say you can't have that, even though that's not really true. But, what happens is another thing. But I think we need to educate ourselves. We need to keep cognizant. We need to support each other and continue to love each other loudly. In the face of hate, I love you too, right? In the face of ignorance, to bring up knowledge, to share stories, diverse stories, to celebrate and affirm the beauty of diversity that makes all of us stronger, that makes our communities more beautiful and rich. And across cultures and history, we have always had tremendous trailblazers, LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus trailblazers that have done phenomenal things that positively impact all of us. So this month, I invite all of us to learn some of those names and to say them with gratitude and to continue to open up our hearts, doors, and spaces. Namaste. I'm going to turn it back over to